Every day, nearly 100 people fly out of Dane County Regional Airport, destined for San Francisco. Sure, some of them are going on vacation, but a lot of them are like entrepreneur Matt Yonkel, heading for Silicon Valley. They're searching for the venture capital needed to keep their startup business going.
And I was just in San Francisco last week.
Yonkel is the CEO and co-founder of Murphy, a Madison tech company looking to store your old CDs and put the music on your own personal cloud on the internet.
So you have a perfect archive of your music collection. It's future-proof. You can stream it, you can download it, you can play it on all sorts of devices. Murphy is about your own music that you own in your own private cloud on the network.
Murphy charges $1 a CD, but as a startup, it needed more money to keep the business growing.
We raised $1.4 million.
Murphy raised another $1.7 million in 2013, but Yonkel was in San Francisco recently looking for venture capital, the big bucks.
If you really need sort of like growth capital, then you don't have as many options because there aren't a lot of VCs with offices around the Capitol Square.
Let's stop there and explain just what venture capital is and why the need for it is driving some of the best small companies out of Wisconsin. It all begins with a great idea or a new way of doing things. To make it happen, you need what's called seed money, which usually comes from the entrepreneur, sometimes by mortgaging their home or maxing out their credit cards. The seed money grows the idea into a business, or at least proves the idea will work. To keep going, the company needs more money, which comes from an angel investor. They're called that because they are a company's savior. An angel can write a big check, anywhere from $100,000 to $1 million. In exchange, the angel becomes part owner. As the startup keeps meeting goals and growing, eventually it needs more money than the angels can provide. That next level of money is called venture capital. It comes from firms that invest other people's money in startups, hoping for a huge payday a few years down the road. Unfortunately, there's not enough venture capital in Wisconsin, and the startup often has to look to San Francisco or Boston to get funding.
There are investors who will say, I'll invest in you, but I want you to be near me.
Zach Brandon is with the Greater Madison Chamber of Commerce and also with the Wisconsin Angel Network, which helps match angel investors with startups.
And we've grown a lot of companies to the point where they need venture capital.
Tax breaks passed in 2005 helped create more angel investors. And while that helped local startups thrive, they now need venture capital.
You have a pooling of these companies that are ready to go to the next level. And if they can't find it, they'll go somewhere else.
When companies like Murphy head to the coast to raise money, the expectation is they'll relocate there.
We got asked that every meeting. It wasn't a question of if are you guys going to move to Boston? Sort of like, when are you moving out here? It was just assumed.
It's not an unreasonable expectation. Venture capital firms aren't banks. They don't just lend money and wait for you to pay interest.
It is actually rolling up your sleeves and getting actively involved. We're typically going onto the boards of directors.
John Nice is the managing director at Venture Investors, one of the only venture capital firms in Wisconsin. They only make money when the startup succeeds.
I like being available if they want to call me up and say, hey, I want you to meet somebody. Can you come over and join us for a meeting tomorrow? I'd like your input on this.
Wisconsin has a history of seeing startups grow big elsewhere. A decade ago, this brick building on Silver Spring Drive, just outside Milwaukee, was the home to a small tech company that had a big idea.
How could you network all of the devices across the grid and the utilities?
Eric Dresselhaus was the co-founder and says they were struggling to come up with a name.
We said, when you get to be a really big company, they name the street after you. So we adopted the name of the street we were on as the name of the company, and that was the day we became Silver Spring Networks.
Silver Spring Networks raised some angel money locally, but when it came time to raise venture capital, it hit a wall.
There really wasn't a culture for venture capital, certainly at the scales that we needed to drive our business.
Dresselhaus says they needed between $10 and $20 million, so they headed to California.
We were able to find it on relatively short notice.
Additional venture capital raised last year came even faster.
We were able to raise $150 million in about a month.
Silver Spring Networks, building tomorrow's new energy-efficient grid today.
Today, Silver Spring Networks is a leader in smart grid technology. It does business on 5 continents and employs 650 people. The only connection to Wisconsin is Eric's degree from the University of Wisconsin and his love for the Packers.
We don't have an office or a presence in Wisconsin today.
If they've been able to raise enough venture capital in Wisconsin, there's a good chance Silver Spring Networks would still be located on Silver Spring Drive. And not just because of the street sign or the chance for free rent, but because once a company and its employees put down roots, it's awfully hard to get them to move.
And that becomes really the most valuable asset for the company. So moving those people is a difficult proposition.
Meet the Snowshoe Stamp, a secure, intuitive, and inexpensive method of authenticating interactions.
So what's the next big thing to leave Wisconsin? It could be a company called Snowshoe.
I would love to still be living in Madison.
Klaus Moberg is the CEO. He won a business plan competition while getting his PhD at UW-Madison. While working on that business plan, he ran into a roadblock.
We ended up inventing our current technology, the Snowshoe Stamp, to solve that problem, and then very quickly realized that we had invented something that had broad application outside of that specific niche.
The stamp is 5 points that touch on your mobile phone, creating a unique signature.
And simply by moving the points around, we can create different sort of identifiers.
Imagine this stamp replacing the old loyalty card at a coffee shop, or a gamer buying a toy with the stamp inside and then using it to activate a new weapon in a game. The stamps are made with a 3D printer in less than an hour.
It's inexpensive, requires no power, can be easily replaced.
Snowshoe raised $1 million in seed money in Wisconsin, but CEO Moberg says those angel investors couldn't help after that.
The seed investors that funded this company at its earliest stages did not have significant connections into the next stage of capital.
Snowshoe opened an office in San Francisco to find venture capital, but still has staff in Madison for now.
And I can't tell you where we're going to be 2, 3, 4 years from now.
Snowshoe's Madison office is in this co-working space just down the hall from John Nice and venture investors who declined to invest in them.
And we see several hundred business plans a year and invest in a handful of them. Our goal with our companies is to grow them very rapidly, either get them public or have them acquired by big companies.
Notice the one positive outcome venture capitalists are not looking for: slow, steady growth. In fact, jobs are not a priority at all.
For us, it's investment returns first, and out of that, if there are jobs created or jobs retained, that's a benefit.
Chris Prestigiacomo manages regional venture capital for the State of Wisconsin Investment Board, which manages the state pension fund. He says even if no long-term jobs are created, seeing a startup get bought out has a positive impact in the state.
As companies exit, dollars are pushed out in the community. That only creates momentum where more dollars then are put back to work to invest in new companies.
Zach Brandon says eventually a few of those startups will become huge employers.
If we can keep it long enough, these companies, when they scale big and they create lots of jobs.
While everyone agrees Wisconsin needs more venture capital, the future is not as bleak as it once was.
There's some momentum building, and I'm very optimistic on the future of the state.
And the hope is that more of those flights will return from the coast, with the young CEO having obtained the funding needed to grow their company here in Wisconsin.
That was Zach Schultz reporting. Help is on the way for startups looking for venture capital in Wisconsin. 2 new firms will be starting up soon. To tell us more about that is Carl Goldbranson, Managing Director at the Wisconsin Alumni Research Foundation, or WARF. And thanks very much for being here.
Good to be here.
Well, one of the primary questions for us is, why doesn't Wisconsin have more venture capital?
We've been talking about this for 20 years. Part of it is there's not a lot of public companies in this state, so that people are leaving, having made a lot in the market and wanting to start venture. Part of it is the fact that it's difficult to get here. You have to stop in Chicago or Minneapolis or Detroit before you get here. People don't want to take 2 flights to get to the place where they're investing. What we're really lacking is what's called seed funding. That's the initial funding that goes in right after the angels. If a company does become successful, there is venture money, but that's in the later stages. But in the early stages, we've got one fund in town, Venture Investors. They're on their 4th or 5th fund now. They've been very loyal. They've been great for WARF, great for the university, but it's one fund. So we'd like to have more.